Scream 5, or Scream 2022 as I'm going to call it, because I'm not calling it just Scream, because it shares the same title as the first movie, is directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, and is the fifth film in the Scream franchise that started out with from being directed by Wes Craven in the 90s. And in this story, it takes place several years after the events of the last film, Scream 4. And in this story, it deals with basically a series of Ghostface killings that come around. And this time, it essentially tackles a lot more with the legacy sequels, as it's pronounced, as it goes with essentially following a killer that is into basically going off of picking off these new group of teens that have essentially connections and very familiarity with the original characters from the other films. And I'll leave it there because there's some stuff I can't really get into without really going to spoilers, so I'll leave it there with that. Now here's a little backstory. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, I've been a very big fan of the Scream franchise, and about 5 years ago, me and Eddie did a retrospective of all 4 of the Scream movies. And to this day, the first 2 films alone were always considered one of my favorite slasher films growing up. And what Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson did with the 90s and bringing this genre of slasher films into something that was pretty much refreshing and new at the time, revitalized the slasher genre and created a new way of making things a lot more self-aware with its satirical approach, with playing into the slasher tropes that were going on and taking a new spin on it while mixing a lot of humor that was trying to also keep it straightforward. And since the first 2 came out, I've always loved them for the fact that they were just fun movies from the 90s that were able to grow us into seeing a whole new approach of what slasher films do. Now, ironically enough, that unfortunately created a lot more knockoffs and rip-offs that came in the 90s and also in the 2000s following that, including Urban Legend, I Know You Did Last Summer and all that. But Scream itself was always a franchise that I grew so fondly with the characters and the way that they played into the commentary on how they work with slasher films, that each sequel, each sequel that followed, they always put a new approach with it. The second one we had it with sequels, the third one we had with trilogies, which even though 3 is my least favorite, I still like the film, and there's some stuff in it that I think really did tie it up a notch with the first film. And then with the 4th film, it was dealing with remakes, and a little bit with kind of a mixture of doing reboots and remakes, while also doing like kind of a spin with found footage in a small kind of capacity. And so ever since the 4th film came out, I didn't really expect them to really make any more, because after that came out, we also had that TV series that came out, which I never watched because I watched like the first couple episodes and I really couldn't get into it. And to me, that kind of material just probably, I don't really think really worked too well as a television series, in my opinion. So I haven't seen the show, but I just didn't really bother to watch it because it just didn't really appeal to me. And with it being on MTV, it really just felt like a very neutered down kind of way of, of showing what the actual movies were like. And so, tragically, when we lost Wes Craven in 2015, it really felt like we weren't going to get another Scream movie for really anymore. And at this point, it was like, what else can you really do with the franchise? And then word came around a couple years ago when we had the directors that did Ready or Not having an approach to do another Scream film, and they got the blessing with Kevin Williamson, who wrote the film's original the first, second, and 4th movie. And I did really enjoy Ready or Not, so with these directors, I kind of really was interested in what they were going to do with the approach. And when I heard they were going to tackle more of basically following a legacy type of series where they're dealing with like sequels to old franchises years later and trying to like take a sort of like meta spin on it, kind of like what we got with last year of the Matrix Matrix Resurrections, and also with a lot of continuing franchises like the Star Wars sequels, Blade Runner 2049, a lot of legacy sequels that were trying to follow the other films while also creating a new franchise, so to speak. And that's pretty much what that Scream 4 did, but this one, they were really trying to up it a lot more this time with what they could do with basically tackling fandoms as well. And so, upon really seeing the film, I can honestly say that I was I really did enjoy this movie a lot. Now, is it as good as, say, the first two films? Well, I'd say that I still have Scream 2 beat over this one, but I will say that as far as this one, there's things about it that I still prefer in Scream 4 over this one, but then there's things I like in this one a little over Scream 4. So it's kind of about the same I have with Scream 4 in that regard. So I have it kind of tied with Scream 4. And so, getting to my pros, I will say I thought the new cast, the characters in the new cast, the new younger cast, I thought really did a good job. The ones that really stood out for me the best were Melissa Barrera, who plays the new girl Sam Carpenter, which, funny enough, they have a lot of names in this film that are references to old horror movie directors. And then you also have Jenna Ortega and also Jack Quaid and all of them. I thought all the new cast did a pretty fantastic job, and those two really stood out the best. Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega, who play sisters, and they really carried a lot more of the emotional stuff that I was really surprised with, that they really did. It reminded me a lot with Samara Weaving's performance in Ready or Not, in that they really feel like they were going for, well, I don't really want to say go for an Oscar, so to speak, but I would say that they really pulled a lot of great integrity with their emotional weight to the film that was really put a lot of the stakes high in this. And that's one of my other biggest things too, I will admit, is that the movie does push a lot more of this, a lot more things that are more in the stakes this time compared to what 4 did. But at the same time, there's some things that they really felt like they could have really pushed a lot more of the boundaries with in order to really propel with where we're going with the actual like plotting. That I'll get into some of my like minor cons I'll have with. But to give my other pros, I really enjoy the way Ghostface turned out in this. And once again, Roger L. Jackson I've always enjoyed as the voice of the killer. And he is not only very menacing as fuck this time, like he's always been, but I just love the way that the killer's voice is very taunting, a lot more of the way that we saw him in the original films this time. He's a lot more, this killer's a lot more brutal and goes into the most extreme that we've seen him do since the first two films, at least. And I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. Like, some of the kills they get away with this movie, I was feeling very squeamish at times. I'm not going to go into detail, but let's just say that there's a couple of them that I was just like, my jaw just really dropped, and I was just so like shocked to see how the killer pulled this off in a lot of the scenes, especially using just a knife in some parts. But to get my other pros, I was also great seeing the cast again, the original characters come back, especially David Arquette, always great as Dewey. And Neve Campbell, of course, and Courtney Cox. And it was also great seeing the Marley Shelton come back from the last film that I thought she really did a great job with as well. And they also have some nice little tie-ins here and there from the other films that I thought were a nice way of honoring the legacy of what the original characters did in the original films. And there is a really great tribute I enjoy with them paying respect to Wes Craven that I thought was very, it was a very good way of them showing that the filmmakers had a lot of respect for Craven's work and the material with the sequels and the original film as well. Now, to get my other pros, I will say I really enjoy the way that the movie does trick into a lot of the way that the killer kind of takes a spin on the way that the killings happen. Because what I love about the direction is that there's moments where you think you know where it's going, where a character is going in one location, but then it kind of switches gears on you where it's not actually going that way. So I thought that was pretty great. That actually did build up a lot of great suspense in moments like that, because it shows that the killer is really, trying to like pull all the strings and trying to really fuck with not only the audience but also the characters in the film in a very clever way. And one of the things I really do enjoy is the way that they actually do take an approach of tackling the ways that we see with fandoms in films. Like how basically there's that toxic fandom that happens where if you basically if you're on the internet and some people don't agree with you on a movie or something, it really commentates about how they approach that with a lot of the ways that of how the killer is handling the situation. Now, there's some things that are illogically speaking that probably wouldn't happen in real life that I'll get to in my cons, but I still bought into what the killer was doing and trying to essentially create the new way of continuing a franchise, so to speak, like the meta approach that it goes with in this regard. And one of the things I also got to appreciate the film is basically tackling the whole how they used the stab sequels and stuff that were based off of the events that took place in the other films, and they really tried to essentially do it as a meta approach where, you know, it's how they look at all the sequels that happen after the original films and after the original stab movies, and they looked at it as they're very inferior and they're not really appealing to the fans that they wanted. And so what this movie does, right, in its clever writing that I really enjoyed, was how they were able to look at how a lot of where we see with fan bases that go too far, and it's not really what fans want, and so they try to basically take a new spin on it. And so I really enjoyed the way that they played into that, because there's also some really cool stuff where you really get to see like scenes that are almost like some meta Inception kind of thing, where you're seeing characters that are like, now going into detail, let's just say there's a character watching a movie of one of the stab movies, of the movie within the movie, and there's like, and the stuff that's happening in the movie is happening in real life. So I thought it was I thought it was pretty cool the way they do that at times, where they're doing the whole meta approach, literally. Now, if I'm going to get into some of my cons, I will say that as much as I was really getting along with the story and I really liked how it played out, there is some stuff that I'm very mixed with. I will say that, I'm not going to go into detail, but the killer's reveal and kind of how they play it out and some of the longevity in the film, I didn't really buy too much. But it's just some of the logic, some of the convenience of ways some characters were able to survive from the killer. I didn't really buy too much in the film, and I think that it was very lacking as far as I don't really want to say realistic, but I would say the groundiness that they're trying to go with, I didn't really think really was 100% quite there, because it does keep it for the most part throughout the film, but once it gets to like the third act, it really seems like there's characters that they actually have that you really kind of wonder if they would really survive from some of the things that happen from the killer. But then there's also some other things where they also make it kind of predictable of who it is a lot this time, which I didn't think they would do that this time, because that's one thing I'll give at least Scream 4 is that they did actually do a good spin on not really knowing who the killer is necessarily, that I found refreshing in the last film. And they actually used a lot of good red herrings in the last film that I thought really worked. But this time, it felt like they were doing red herrings, but then they weren't. And so it was like they couldn't really make up their mind if they were really trying to go with the same old type of cliche that we see in the other films, or if they were trying to really, you know, do their own thing. It was kind of inconsistent. And so that was one of my other things where it feels like I really kind of really predicted about who the killer would be this time. And so that's really one of my other minor cons. But other than that, though, I will say that I really did enjoy the film a lot, and you know, it's good to see that slasher films are becoming a lot more prominent again. And so, with that being said, I'm going to give Scream a compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. So, for those of you who have also seen Scream 2022 or Scream 5, as it should be called, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and also the other Scream movies as well. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe. And I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.